I never thought success would become my greatest vulnerability. When I joined Quantum Solutions as a software developer, I was riding high on excitement and ambition. The Seattle skyline from our office windows seemed like a perfect backdrop for my career aspirations. My friendship with Adrian, our CTO, felt genuine and supportive, but I would soon learn that the higher you climb, the more some people want to pull you down. What happened behind those glass walls nearly destroyed everything I had worked for. Before I reveal how my dream job turned into a nightmare, let me know where you are watching from in the comments. Hit that like button and subscribe to hear more stories about workplace betrayal and how to overcome it. Growing up in a small town in Wisconsin, I never imagined I would end up in the bustling tech scene of Seattle. My parents ran a modest hardware store, instilling in me the values of hard work and integrity from an early age. Computers became my escape, a world where merit mattered more than connections or background. I taught myself coding through online resources and eventually earned a scholarship to study computer science. After graduation, I bounced between a few smaller tech companies, building my skills and reputation. Then came the opportunity that would change everything. An interview at Quantum Solutions, a rising star in the artificial intelligence space that was attracting serious venture capital attention. The Quantum Solutions headquarters occupied 3 floors of a sleek downtown building. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered panoramic views of the city and Puget Sound beyond. The office hummed with energy. Developers huddled around monitors. Whiteboard walls covered in diagrams and code snippets and casual meeting pods where animated discussions about the future of technology took place daily. My interview with Adrian Palmer, the Chief Technology Officer, felt more like an energizing conversation than a formal assessment. Adrian had the rare combination of technical brilliance and people skills that made him respected throughout the industry. His salt and pepper hair and designer glasses gave him an air of authority, but his casual demeanor put people at ease. When he called personally to offer me the position, I accepted on the spot. "We see something special in you, Gregory," he told me. "I think you could go far here." The company culture initially seemed like everything I had dreamed about. Collaboration was encouraged, innovation celebrated, and work-life balance actually respected. Free lunches, game rooms, and monthly team outings fostered a sense of community that made everyone feel valued. As I settled in, I began forming relationships with key people in the company. Jessica Harper, from Human Resources, took me under her wing, helping me navigate the company benefits and culture. Always impeccably dressed with her hair pulled back in a tight bun, Jessica projected an air of professional competence that inspired confidence. Dominic Reyes, another developer who joined just 2 months before me, became my first workplace friend. With his perpetual 5 o'clock shadow and collection of vintage band t-shirts, Dominic brought an energetic vibe to our coding sessions and became my lunch buddy. From a distance, I observed Taylor Wright, our CEO, whose visionary leadership had put Quantum Solutions on the map. Though he rarely interacted with newer employees directly, his company-wide presentations sparked genuine excitement about our collective mission. Then there was Marcus Finch, the Chief Operating Officer, whose calculating gaze seemed to constantly evaluate everyone in terms of profit and loss. His crisp suits and precision-timed meetings reflected his approach to business: methodical, practical, and sometimes ruthlessly efficient. My breakthrough came 6 months into the job. We were developing an algorithm to predict consumer behavior for a major retail client. The project was hitting roadblocks, with the system generating too many false positives. During a weekend of voluntary overtime, I had an epiphany about restructuring the decision tree in a way that slashed error rates by 60%. When I demonstrated my solution at the next team meeting, the room fell silent. Then Adrian broke into applause, followed by the entire development team. Word spread quickly, and by the afternoon, Taylor Wright himself stopped by my desk. "Impressive work, Gregory," he said, his hand extended. "This is exactly the kind of innovative thinking we need." That evening, Adrian invited me for drinks to celebrate. "Keep this up," he said, clinking his glass against mine, "and you will be looking at a senior position before you know it." I noticed something flicker across his face as he said it. Just a momentary tightness around the eyes gone so quickly. I convinced myself I had imagined it. But looking back, that was the first warning sign. Success at Quantum Solutions had put me on the radar, not just for advancement but for something far more sinister than I could have anticipated. When Taylor Wright called me into his office the following month, I felt a surge of optimism. The CEO rarely interacted with employees at my level unless something significant was happening. "Gregory, I have been watching your contributions closely," Taylor said, leaning forward in his ergonomic chair. "We have a new project with enormous potential. A security system using behavioral patterns to detect unauthorized access. Given your innovative approach to problem solving, I want you to take the lead." My heart raced with excitement. This was not just any project. It was potentially revolutionary for the cybersecurity industry. Leading it would cement my position at Quantum and could define my career trajectory for years to come. "Adrian will provide oversight, of course," Taylor added, "but we want your fresh perspective driving this forward." I threw myself into the work with unbridled enthusiasm. My apartment became a secondary office with whiteboards covering my walls and notepads filled with ideas scattered across every surface. I researched similar technologies, identified their shortcomings, and envisioned solutions that would make our products stand out in the crowded marketplace. Nights became indistinguishable from days. I subsisted on delivery food and excessive coffee, but the exhaustion felt worthwhile. This was my chance to make a genuine impact in the field I loved. Adrian checked in, regularly offering resources and appearing supportive. During one late evening session in his office, I shared my most groundbreaking idea, using neural network architecture to create a self-evolving security protocol that could anticipate breach methods before hackers even implemented them. "This is brilliant, Gregory Adrian," said, his eyes widening as he reviewed my preliminary diagrams. Truly innovative thinking. His enthusiasm seemed genuine. He asked detailed questions, helping me refine certain aspects of the concept. When we parted ways after midnight, he clapped me on the shoulder. "Keep this between us for now," he advised. "Let us develop it further before we present to the executive team. This could be revolutionary." I trusted him completely. After all, he had been my biggest champion since day one. Why would I question his motives? 3 weeks later, the quarterly executive presentation arrived. These high-level meetings allowed project leaders to showcase progress and secure continued funding. Since our security project was still in early development, I expected a brief mention at most, perhaps setting the stage for a more comprehensive presentation in the following quarter. I settled into a seat toward the back of the conference room notebook, ready to capture insights from other presentations that might benefit our work. Adrian stepped up to the podium for his CTO update, beginning with standard department metrics and upcoming milestones. Then he shifted gears. "I want to preview an exciting new direction for our security division," he announced, clicking to a new slide. My stomach dropped. On the screen was a slightly modified version of my neural network architecture, the one I had shared with him in confidence, the one we had agreed to develop further before presenting. By implementing a predictive neural network that can anticipate breach methodologies, Adrian continued, "we can create a truly revolutionary product that will put us years ahead of competitors." He proceeded to outline my concept in detail, never once mentioning my name or contribution. With each word, my initial shock transformed into a sickening realization. This was not an oversight. This was deliberate. Taylor Wright leaned forward, visibly impressed. "This is exceptional work, Adrian. Exactly the kind of forward thinking we need." Other executives nodded in agreement, several making notes. Marcus Finch, always focused on financials, actually smiled, a rare sight that indicated he saw significant profit potential. I sat frozen, unable to process the magnitude of what was happening. Should I speak up now in front of everyone? Would they believe me? Or would I come across as petty and unprofessional? The questions paralyzed me as Adrian continued receiving accolades for my innovation. After the meeting, I waited until the conference room cleared before approaching Adrian. "That was my security concept," I said, struggling to keep my voice steady. We discussed developing it together before presenting. Adrian's expression shifted subtly, his typically warm demeanor cooling by degrees. "Gregory, we discussed similar concepts, certainly, but this implementation is significantly different from your preliminary ideas." Different. It was identical right down to the adaptive response mechanisms I designed. He sighed, placing a hand on my shoulder that now felt like a weight rather than support. Listen, in this industry, similar ideas often develop concurrently. I have been working on predictive security models for years. Your input was valuable, but this particular architecture reflects my extensive experience in the field. His casual dismissal left me speechless. Was I going crazy? Had I somehow misremembered our late-night collaboration? Besides, he continued, lowering his voice. You are still establishing yourself here. I would hate to see you develop a reputation for claiming credit. That could seriously impact your future at Quantum. The thinly veiled threat hung in the air between us. Before I could formulate a response, he checked his watch and excused himself for another meeting, leaving me alone with the devastating realization that my mentor had betrayed me. That night, sleep evaded me completely. I lay awake, replaying every interaction with Adrian, wondering how I had misread someone so completely. The excitement that had fueled weeks of intense work gave way to a hollow ache in my chest. For the first time since joining Quantum Solutions, I dreaded going to work the next morning. The following weeks revealed that Adrian's betrayal was not a one-time opportunistic decision, but the beginning of a systematic campaign. I tried to move forward, focusing on the technical aspects of implementing the security system, my security system, but found myself constantly undermined. During team meetings, Adrian would frequently interrupt my explanations, clarifying points in ways that subtly discredited my approach. What Gregory is trying to say became his favorite phrase, followed by a slightly altered version of exactly what I had been saying. More disturbing were the technical issues that began plaguing my work. Code that functioned perfectly during my testing would mysteriously develop bugs when demonstrated to others. Database queries I had optimized would suddenly run inefficiently. At first, I attributed these problems to system inconsistencies or my own oversight, but the pattern became too consistent to ignore. The office atmosphere shifted around me. Conversations would halt when I approached the break room. Colleagues who previously sought my input began routing their questions through other team members. Even Dominic, who I considered a friend, became increasingly distant, making excuses to cancel our regular lunch outings. The revelation came through an email thread, accidentally copied to me. The subject line read G's project status, and the exchange between Adrian and several senior developers outlined concerns about my erratic coding practices and resistance to guidance. They discussed documentation discrepancies in my work that I knew for certain did not exist. The thread revealed that Adrian had been systematically building a case against me, planting seeds of doubt about my competence and reliability. My hands shook with a combination of anger and disbelief as I scrolled through the messages. One line from Adrian stood out. We need to closely monitor all of Gregory's contributions going forward. Documentation timestamps are especially important. The implication was clear. He was setting the groundwork to claim that any future innovations I developed had actually originated with him. Hoping to find support, I scheduled a meeting with Jessica from HR. Her office had always felt like a safe space with its calming blue walls and the small fountain bubbling quietly in the corner. But that day the atmosphere felt different, clinical and adversarial. Gregory, she began, her usually warm tone, replaced by professional detachment. Some concerns have been raised about your recent work performance. Concerns. By whom, I asked, though I already knew the answer. That is confidential, she replied. But there have been mentions of missed deadlines and inconsistent documentation. Those claims are completely unfounded, I protested. My work has been thorough and on schedule. In fact, I have been putting in extra hours to ensure quality. Jessica shuffled through a folder on her desk. According to these records, your last 3 module submissions required significant revisions by senior developers. What records those modules passed all quality checks when I submitted them? She pushed a document across the desk. A performance review I had never seen before, with critical comments that contradicted the positive feedback I had received directly from users of my code. As the meeting progressed, it became clear that Jessica was not an impartial mediator, but another piece in the puzzle working against me. Every explanation I offered was met with skepticism, every concern dismissed as defensiveness. The meeting concluded with a performance improvement plan, typically the first formal step toward termination. The following day brought another shock. While grabbing coffee, I overheard Dominic mention to another developer that he had been keeping tabs on my computer activity. The casual way he referenced monitoring my work suggested this had been happening for some time. Returning to my desk, I discreetly checked my system logs and discovered numerous remote access events during hours I wasn't in the office. Someone had been reviewing my files, running my code, and potentially making changes without my knowledge or consent. The pieces were falling into place, painting a picture more disturbing than I had imagined. This wasn't just Adrian acting alone. It was a coordinated effort involving multiple colleagues I had trusted. My suspicions were confirmed 2 weeks later, when an unexpected performance review was scheduled with Marcus Finch, the COO. Marcus had never taken a direct interest in developer evaluations before, which made the sudden scrutiny all the more concerning. The review was brutal. Marcus cited numerous instances of code inefficiency, documentation, inconsistencies, and collaborative difficulties, all claims that contradicted my actual performance metrics. When I attempted to defend my work, he cut me off. "The evidence is quite clear, Gregory," he said coldly. "Adrian has expressed considerable patience working with you, but the company needs reliable performers." Later that afternoon, while searching for documentation to counter the false claims against me, I passed by the executive conference room. Through the partially open door, I heard Adrian and Marcus discussing budget reallocations. Once we transitioned Gregory out, Adrian was saying we can redistribute his salary to expand the senior development team. "The termination needs to appear performance-based," Marcus replied. "Ensure all documentation supports that narrative." I stepped away before they could notice me, my heart pounding in my ears. The betrayal had evolved from stealing my ideas to actively plotting my removal from the company. The final blow came when I discovered new marketing materials for our security product. The glossy brochure described the Palmer Predictive Protocol, named after Adrian, with my architecture presented as his pioneering innovation. My name appeared nowhere in the documentation, not even in the list of contributing developers. The stress began taking a physical toll. Sleep became a distant memory replaced by nights of anxiety and rumination. I lost weight as my appetite vanished. Headaches became my constant companion, and my hands would occasionally tremble when I tried to code. The walls were closing in. Former allies avoided eye contact in the hallways. My access to certain development servers was restricted due to security protocols. Even my desk seemed to have been subtly isolated, with nearby team members gradually relocating to other areas of the open office. I had become a ghost in the company I had once seen as my future. The question was no longer if I would be forced out, but when, and whether there would be anything left of my professional reputation when it happened. The client presentation for our security system was scheduled for a Friday morning in the main conference room. Despite my diminishing role, I was still officially the lead developer and expected to demonstrate the core functionality. I spent days preparing, reviewing every line of code, anticipating questions, and rehearsing my presentation to perfection. The morning of the presentation, I arrived early to set up and run final tests. Everything functioned flawlessly during my pre-checks. Representatives from Secure National Bank, a potential client worth millions in annual contracts, filed in alongside our executive team. This was not just any demonstration. It was potentially the largest deal in Quantum Solutions history. Taylor Wright made introductions emphasizing the revolutionary nature of our security system, spearheaded by our visionary CTO Adrian Palmer, with support from our development team. My contribution had been reduced to an anonymous mention of support. When my turn came to demonstrate the system, I stepped forward confidently. This was still my creation, regardless of whose name was attached to it. I began walking through the user interface, explaining how the neural network identified and responded to potential security threats. Then it happened. As I initiated the central demonstration, a simulation of the system detecting and neutralizing a sophisticated breach attempt, the application crashed completely. Not with a simple error message, but with a catastrophic failure that splashed incomprehensible code across the projection screen. The room fell silent. I felt every eye boring into me as I frantically tried to restart the system. "Perhaps we should take a short break," Taylor suggested after several excruciating minutes of failed recovery attempts. That will not be necessary, Adrian interjected smoothly. I anticipated potential issues with the development build and prepared a backup demonstration. He connected his laptop to the projector and within moments was running a perfect version of the same demonstration that had just failed on my system. The clients looked relieved, executives impressed, and I stood by utterly humiliated as Adrian flawlessly presented my work. As you can see, Adrian explained to the clients, the system not only detects conventional attacks, but anticipates and adapts to new threat vectors before they become widespread. The clients were entranced, asking technical questions that Adrian answered with confidence, using information and explanations I had prepared. When one client directed a question to me, Adrian interrupted before I could respond. Gregory has been assisting with implementation, but perhaps I can address the architectural concerns more comprehensively, he said, effectively, silencing me for the remainder of the meeting. By the time the presentation concluded, the damage was complete. The clients shook Adrian's hand, enthusiastically congratulating him on his innovation. Taylor Wright was beaming at the virtually guaranteed contract. And I was invisible. A failure whose only notable contribution had been a system crash that Adrian had fortunately anticipated and prepared for. As the room cleared, Taylor pulled me aside, his expression grave. "We need to discuss your position here," he said quietly. "This kind of failure with a key client present is unacceptable. We will meet first thing Monday morning to reconsider your role." I nodded mutely, knowing that the Monday meeting would be nothing more than a formality preceding my termination. 3 years of education, 2 years of building my career, and 8 months of pouring my heart and soul into quantum solutions, all culminating in professional humiliation and impending unemployment. I gathered my things and left early, unable to face the pitying or triumphant glances from colleagues who had witnessed my downfall. In the underground parking garage, I was heading to my car when voices echoed from behind a concrete pillar. "That could not have gone better if we planned it," Dominic was saying, a hint of laughter in his voice. "We did plan it," Adrian replied coolly. The fail-safe trigger worked perfectly. I froze, then slowly stepped behind a nearby SUV, straining to hear their conversation. "Was corrupting his demonstration files really necessary?" asked a female voice I recognized as Jessica's. "The documentation discrepancies would have been enough to justify termination. The client presentation failure ensures Taylor will not question our decision," Adrian explained. Gregory needed to be discredited completely, not just removed. I could scarcely believe what I was hearing. They had deliberately sabotaged my demonstration, the culmination of months of work, the product I had conceived and built from the ground up. Unable to contain myself, I stepped out from behind the vehicle. "You sabotaged my presentation." The three of them turned, momentarily startled. Adrian recovered first, his expression shifting from surprise to smug confidence. "Gregory," he said calmly, "I was wondering when you would figure it out." "Why?" I demanded, my voice echoing in the concrete structure. "Why go to these lengths? You already took credit for my work." Adrian stepped closer, lowering his voice, though we were alone in the garage. "Because you are a threat, Gregory. Your type always is, the brilliant young innovator, the fresh perspective, the rising star. I have spent 15 years building my position here. Did you really think I would let someone like you walk in and overshadow me? I never wanted to overshadow anyone," I protested. "I just wanted to do good work." "Your good work had Taylor talking about fast-tracking you to a director position," Adrian hissed. "Your good work had venture capitalists asking about you by name. Your good work made me look stagnant by comparison." The raw truth of his jealousy hung in the air between us. Dominic and Jessica exchanged uncomfortable glances but remained firmly by Adrian's side. "You will never prove any of this," Adrian continued, confidence returning to his voice. "Every document, every code review, every performance evaluation supports our narrative. By Monday afternoon, you will be escorted out of the building, and within a week, your access credentials for the security project will be wiped from the system entirely." "You cannot just erase me," I said, fighting to keep my voice steady. Adrian smiled coldly. "I already have." They walked past me toward their vehicles, leaving me standing alone in the dimly lit garage, the full weight of the conspiracy crashing down on me. Everything I had worked for was being systematically destroyed by people I had trusted, respected, and in some cases even considered friends. That night was the darkest of my life. I sat in my apartment surrounded by the whiteboards and notes that represented months of innovation that would now bear another man's name. The temptation to give up was overwhelming. What was the point of fighting against a conspiracy that had infiltrated every level of the company? How could I possibly win against opponents who had spent months laying the groundwork for my destruction? I considered my options. I could resign immediately and try to salvage some dignity. I could hire an attorney, though proving intellectual property theft would be nearly impossible, given how thoroughly they had covered their tracks. I could try to find another job, though Adrian's influence in the industry would likely follow me. As dawn broke after a sleepless night, something hardened within me. The devastation and helplessness began to crystallize into resolve. They had taken my work, my reputation, and were about to take my job, but I would not let them take my dignity or my future without a fight. I had built a security system designed to identify and counter sophisticated attacks. Perhaps it was time to apply those principles to my own situation. If I had learned anything from creating the security algorithm, it was that every system has vulnerabilities, even the most carefully constructed conspiracy. I spent the weekend developing a strategy. If I was going to reclaim my work and reputation, I needed irrefutable evidence that even the most biased observer could not dismiss. My first step was methodically documenting everything, every idea, every contribution, every instance of sabotage I could identify. Rather than confronting Adrian directly again, I decided to work in stealth mode. Years of being underestimated as the quiet developer from a small town had taught me the power of being overlooked. While they believed I was preparing for inevitable termination, I would be building my case. My first breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Shannon Lewis, a developer who had left Quantum 6 months earlier, responded to my carefully worded message about seeking career advice with surprising candor. "The same thing happened to me," she wrote. "My machine learning algorithm for the Davidson project became Adrian's breakthrough approach a week before my performance suddenly became concerning. I have documentation but no platform to challenge him." Shannon was the first of 3 former employees who shared nearly identical experiences. Adrian's pattern of appropriating innovations and eliminating their creators had been ongoing for years, creating a growing pool of discarded talent, harboring quiet resentment. Next, I needed to document the technical sabotage. Using a personal laptop outside the company network, I created a secure environment to analyze the demonstration files from the failed presentation. After hours of forensic work, I identified a subtle trigger mechanism planted in the code, designed to crash the system when a specific sequence of features was demonstrated. The code signature matched Dominic's typical programming style perfectly down to his characteristic variable naming conventions. More importantly, the file modification timestamps proved the changes occurred during hours when my system log showed remote access from his credentials. For conversations with Adrian and his accomplices, I took a calculated risk. During our next project meeting, I placed my phone in recording mode inside my jacket pocket. While many states require 2-party consent for recordings, I was banking on the evidence being compelling enough that its collection method would become secondary. "Adrian, I am confused about the documentation for the adaptive response module," I asked innocently during the meeting. "The original specifications seem different from what we are implementing. That is because your understanding of the architecture is incomplete," he replied dismissively. "The current implementation reflects my original design intent, which you have apparently misinterpreted. But the initial concept document I submitted in February outlined exactly this approach I pressed. Your document presented a rudimentary version that required significant refinement," Adrian said, growing irritated. "Can we move on to actual development issues rather than continuing your preoccupation with credit?" The recording captured not just his words but the condescending tone that had become his standard response to my questions. More importantly, it established a timeline reference to my February document, a document I had fortunately backed up to my personal cloud storage before it was altered in the company system. My most valuable ally emerged entirely by chance. While working late one evening, I encountered Lydia Parker, Taylor Wright's executive assistant, similarly burning the midnight oil. Unlike others who now avoided me, Lydia struck up a conversation about the pressure of approaching deadlines. As we chatted, I carefully steered the conversation toward document management. It must be challenging keeping track of all the executive presentations and proposals, I remarked casually. You have no idea, she sighed, especially when people keep requesting last-minute changes or wanting to check previous versions. That single comment opened a critical door. Lydia, it turned out, maintained an independent archive of all executive presentations for compliance purposes, including the original presentation where I had first shared my security concept with the leadership team months before Adrian claimed it as his own. Taylor likes having records of how ideas evolve, she explained. I keep versions with speaker notes attached. Over the next week, I pieced together a comprehensive timeline, supported by documentation that even Adrian's meticulous manipulation had missed. While company servers might have been scrubbed of evidence, external archives, personal backups, and independent witnesses provided enough material to construct an undeniable case. The most damning evidence came from recovering emails through a server backup that Adrian had apparently forgotten about. As part of another project, I had been granted temporary access to development server backups. Within these archives, I discovered email exchanges between Adrian, Dominic, and Marcus, explicitly discussing their strategy for appropriating my work and orchestrating my exit. The security architecture is too valuable to leave in G's hands, Adrian had written. Once we secure the Natal Bank contract, we can transition ownership and documentation. M will handle the performance case. With my termination meeting scheduled for Monday morning, I made my move on Sunday night. I compiled all evidence into a comprehensive presentation and sent a single, carefully worded email to Taylor Wright and the entire board of directors. Before decisions are made about my future at Quantum Solutions, I request 30 minutes to present critical information about the security system architecture and its development. What I need to share impacts not just my position but the company's integrity and legal exposure. I arrived Monday morning with my evidence secured in multiple formats. Rather than the small HR conference room where terminations typically occurred, I was directed to the main boardroom. Taylor Wright sat at the head of the table, flanked by board members and legal counsel. Adrian's confident smile faltered slightly at my unexpected composure. Gregory Taylor began, "Formally, you requested this opportunity to speak before we finalize decisions about your position. You have 30 minutes. Thank you, I replied, connecting my laptop to the projection system. What I am about to present will be difficult to hear, but it is supported by extensive evidence. For the next 28 minutes, I methodically laid out the case. The original concept documents with my authorship metadata intact, the progressive theft of intellectual property, the coordinated campaign to discredit me, and finally, the explicit sabotage of the client presentation. I presented technical forensics of the triggered failure testimony from former employees who had experienced similar treatment and the damning email exchanges discussing the conspiracy. The room grew increasingly tense as the evidence mounted. Adrian attempted to interject several times, but Taylor silenced him with raised hand. Most concerning, I concluded, is not just the theft of intellectual property, but the willing participation of multiple employees in sabotaging a client presentation worth millions in potential revenue, purely to advance personal agendas. When I finished, the silence was deafening. Adrian finally broke it with a forced laugh. This is clearly a desperate attempt by a failing employee to shift blame, he began. These documents could easily be fabricated, and recording conversations violates company policy and possibly state law. The company's legal counsel leaned forward. The email server archives would be difficult to fabricate, Mr. Palmer, and while the recording may present procedural issues, the content is nonetheless troubling. Taylor Wright had not spoken throughout my presentation. Now he turned to Adrian, his expression unreadable. Did you author the security system architecture that we presented to Secure National Bank? Adrian hesitated just a moment too long. The core concepts were developed under my guidance with Gregory and others contributing implementation details. That is not what these original documents suggest, Taylor replied coldly. Nor does it align with the email exchanges where you explicitly discuss appropriating his work. The carefully constructed facade began crumbling. Dominic stared at the table, unwilling to meet anyone's eyes. Marcus attempted to frame the situation as a misunderstanding about contribution attribution, corporate speak, for admitting guilt, while minimizing consequences. What followed was a flurry of closed-door meetings, legal consultations, and human resources procedures that stretched over 3 tense days. By Thursday, the landscape at Quantum Solutions had shifted dramatically. Adrian was placed on administrative leave pending investigation, as were Dominic and Jessica. Marcus, recognizing the changing tide, suddenly recalled conversations that supported my version of events. The board appointed an independent investigator who corroborated my claims within 2 weeks. Adrian was terminated for ethics violations, with Dominic following shortly after. Jessica received a formal reprimand and demotion for her role in falsifying HR documentation. Marcus narrowly survived by portraying himself as another victim of Adrian's manipulation, a characterization I knew to be false, but lacked sufficient evidence to disprove. Most importantly, full credit for the security system architecture was restored to me with official documentation acknowledging my role as primary inventor. The product name was changed from Palmer Predictive Protocol to Quantum Adaptive Security Framework to remove any association with Adrian. Taylor Wright personally apologized for failing to recognize what was happening within his company. "We pride ourselves on innovation and integrity," he told me during a private meeting. I failed to see that one of our leaders was systematically undermining both. My new position as Director of Security Innovation came with a substantial raise-expanded team and direct reporting line to Taylor. The Secure National Bank contract was successfully negotiated, with my name prominently featured in the press release announcing the partnership. Rebuilding trust with colleagues proved challenging. Those who had witnessed my humiliation now approached with awkward congratulations and claims they always knew something was wrong. I accepted their overtures professionally while being careful about where I placed my trust. The healing process was not instantaneous. For months, I double-checked every file, questioned motives behind every interaction, and documented everything meticulously. Paranoia became my default state, threatening to poison new relationships before they could form. What ultimately saved me from becoming permanently bitter was my decision to mentor junior developers, particularly those whose innovations might otherwise be overlooked or appropriated. I created transparent processes for documenting contributions and made sure credit was always properly attributed. A year after those dark days, I sat in my new office overlooking the Seattle skyline, reflecting on everything that had transpired. The betrayal had nearly broken me, but in rebuilding I had discovered strengths I never knew I possessed: resilience, strategic thinking, and the courage to stand up against overwhelming odds. I learned that technical skills alone are insufficient in corporate environments. Understanding people, documenting your contributions, and building genuine alliances are equally crucial for survival and success. Most importantly, I discovered that maintaining your integrity, even when others abandon theirs, provides a foundation that cannot be easily shaken. The experience changed me profoundly. While I became more cautious about trusting others, I refused to let suspicion dominate my life or management style. Instead, I channeled that awareness into creating a more transparent, ethical culture within my team, one where innovation is celebrated and properly credited regardless of seniority or position. Have you ever faced betrayal in your workplace, or had someone take credit for your ideas? How did you handle it? Share your experiences in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more real-life stories about overcoming workplace challenges. Remember, sometimes the darkest moments in our careers become the foundation for our greatest strength and wisdom. Thank you for listening, and may you find the courage to stand up for yourself when facing injustice in your own life.